Tim, here we are again. It's good to be back at the ACAST studio with you.
Absolutely.
So I know you're a tennis fan, and you played tennis at Wash U. You were captain of your team.
Done homework.
Number one player, I think.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. I also know I believe you're a Knicks fan because we spoke about basketball in our conversation with Dave Pensky.
Yeah, for sure.
We never talked about baseball.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also an NCAA fan, college fan. We're in March Madness, and I'm excited about the University of Arizona,
Where you're a professor.
where I'm a professor, and I've become a huge fan of their basketball and
Great
baseball
program.
teams. Great program.
So you go to the baseball games too?
I go to a number of the great stadiums.
I know you're a big Yankee fan, yeah.
Well, that's the question.
Yeah.
Are you a baseball fan?
Yes, I am. I like all sports. I would say baseball's below basketball, and football. I'm a Jet fan. We will not go there because we're going to be positive. But I'm definitely a Yankee fan.
Well, they got a coach now, the Jets, at least.
That's the Giants, Harbaugh.
Harbaugh, right?
Jets
see, that shows you I'm a Cleveland Browns fan.
Oh, are you?
But
I'm sorry for that too.
We are, with everything else that happening now. You were at the Olympics. You're a big fan of hockey. And I'm pretty much a Yankees fan.
Well, you're a Yankee season ticket holder. So
this is my last year.
Ooh.
37 years. Last year was my last year.
Did you get a watch for that or anything? Did you get a watch for that or anything?
I got, Christmas gift from them every year. Depending on how they did, you could judge how they did.
Is that true?
Yeah, by the quality of the...
Oh, is that true?
Yeah.
Did you ever meet a Steinbrenner?
I never met a Steinbrenner. No.
Okay.
No, none of this. I've 37 years as a season ticket holder. This is the first year I do not have season ticket holders.
Talk about OG, Jack.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, back in the old stadium, had great seats, had great seasons with my sons. What I celebrate every year with my sons is opening day of spring training. We send each other Happy New Year's Day cards. And the last day of the Yankee season, whenever their last game is, we send little notes, Happy New Year's Eve. So this whole winter, for, as long as my sons and I have been enjoying baseball together, has been the opening day of spring training, and we're in spring training. And what we share right now is our disappointment with the Yankees and what they've done over the winter. They've done nothing really meaningful to change the reality of being able to compete, not just in their division with the Blue Jays, Baltimore, which might be improving, Boston's improving, but with the Dodgers, who are the good thing is the Yankees are no longer the empire.
The only ones with a checkbook, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the Dodgers are now, the empire. But so where are you in baseball? What's your rooting?
Definitely a Yankee fan.
Good. Thank you.
Been to a few of those big games. This you and your son's story, this sounds like a promo for the Yankees. I mean, did they know this story? I think this sounds like a little outtake for the passion for the franchise.
You would think, the only thing that they send me is they still think that I'm a season ticket holder. So they haven't quite realized that they shouldn't be asking me if I'd like to upgrade to a suite.
Yeah, right. You and Aaron Judge just pick up a suite.
Yeah, I had my
name.
You
and Juan Soto. I mean, you get a suite.
And my seats were always in the Delta suite, so I was a fan of Delta Airlines because of their sponsorship of the Yankees.
So does that mean that this year you don't have the seats, so now we're partners, I won't be going to a game with you? Huh.
The irony is you can probably buy seats close to where I was in the Delta suites for less than half of what I paid for them as a license holder if you just went on StubHub or SeatGeek because of that license fee. And it was a 10-year contract. I had 3 10-year contracts, and the new stadium, the prices are just ridiculous for license holders, but they still sell out.
I feel like, just coming back to the team for a second, I feel like they felt they had a really good team last year. And that's how I felt. And I guess that's being borne out by what they didn't do all off season. I hope they stay healthy. And let's see. But you're making the point that you think they need more assets than they have.
Well, they have Garrett Cole coming back, but not until July.
Oh, okay. I didn't know when that was.
Probably. They have not built around Aaron Judge. I don't think they have the bats to support him. They're bringing Bellinger back, which is good, but, was last year a season that he's going to repeat?
Right.
They brought back Goldschmidt, but he's a bench player. He's a good pinch hitter, and he'll fill in. We don't know whether Wells is going to come back behind the plate or whether Rice will move behind the plate, and then, who's going to be at first base. They've got one young pitcher coming up from AAA who, may prove to be a, solid starter. But I don't know. They haven't added sufficiently to compete with their divisional rivals, no less with the Dodgers.
All right, you're on the record saying that. I was actually thinking maybe we would do a show from Yankee Stadium because you knew everybody. I guess that's not going to be the case, but we're going to watch a couple. We'll watch a couple games together.
We'll watch a couple games together, and nothing stops us from going on SeatGeek and buying a couple seats.
Yeah, exactly. All right, want to kick off?
Which I intend to do.
Awesome.
Yeah, let's go to our guest, who, by the way, has. Maybe we can talk to her about sports, but she's in the news business, and actually, I'm really pleased to introduce Contessa Brewer as our guest today. Contessa, I'm nervous about it, frankly, because I'm not just a longtime admirer of her work as correspondent at CNBC.
You're nervous.
But someone who I've had the privilege of working with at the Newhouse School of Syracuse University Dean's Advisory Board. And Contessa covers a spectrum of business stories with a special focus on casinos and gambling, which I think will be an interesting topic. Maybe that's the sports connection. Contessa has been well known for breaking news stories. She's covered politics. She's covered business, environment, health, education, public policy.
Longtime NBC cable
MSNBC reporter.
Right.
Moved over to CNBC. She covers pop culture, home improvement, and lifestyle thrown in for good measure. Tim, as I said, I'm a bit nervous.
Yeah, why is that?
Because she's one of the most skilled interviewers in the business news business, and she's interviewing executives and senior people in industry every single day. So
you're worried we might be over our skis here?
I'm a little concerned.
All right, well, I'm ready to play some ping pong with her. If she wants to go, let's go.
Let's go for it.
Let's welcome Contessa. Contessa, welcome.
It's great to be here.
It's great to see you, Contessa.
Nice
Thanks
to
for
see you,
being
Jack.
here.
All right, we're going to jump right in. First question we like to ask every guest is a grounding question. And it's not a question about what you do, but it's a question more about who you are. So Contessa, tell us, who are you and what's it like to be you?
I am truly a loving person. I love people, all kinds of people. I love strangers. I love friends that I've had in my life since I was a small child. I love, love, love my twin boys. I love my husband. I'm lucky to have him. Most of the time I love him. Sometimes I hate him. But most of the time I love my husband. And I feel like the thing that I get out of life every day is joy. Nice. I look for it. And even when it's gloomy and dour and gray, I can find moments of joy.
That's awesome. Love that. What a great grounding answer. Question about leadership. So you know a lot of great leaders inside your large company, NBCU, but then also with all of the sectors that you cover. And there's cliche answers about what makes a great leader. Give us a couple insights about great leadership that maybe doesn't always get mentioned, but you see it as a pattern in the great ones.
What has struck me is the people whose leadership I respect are great listeners. When you go into the president of your company, levels above your direct report, and he looks at you, it's almost always been he, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But when he looks at you and he's listening, and he's nodding his head, and he's asking a follow-up question. And especially this gets me every time. If he takes out a pen and writes a note to himself, I feel so validated. And then I want to give that person my all. I want to support what they want. As I've gotten older, I almost never leave a meeting like that without asking, how can I support what you want to do?
That's internal. How about with the business leaders? So that's an incredible quality. Love that little anecdote. What about with business leaders in the sectors that you cover, business leaders in general you've been exposed to as a reporter? What are some of those other qualities? Listening's one.
Yeah,
I guess universal.
And you can see that. And the people that I've seen who are, I mean, there's a different way to look at what makes a great leader, right? There are people who get results, and there are people who other people love to follow. And it can be that those are two very different leaders. Probably the people who make headlines are those who can do both. Can you get the results, and can you be the person that other people want to follow? Sometimes great leaders go in and they are jerks. You can see it. They walk in with a posse. They don't speak to the people around them. They are not giving credit to the teamwork that is required to get them where they are. And they've managed to get where they are anyway. That's always remarkable to me. But because I'm a person who loves people, I want to see leaders who are acknowledging those around them. I travel with a crew of camera and audio people and producers. And when I sit down with a CEO and that CEO makes a point of reaching out and addressing my photographers and my audio guys and my producer and making sure to ask their names and thank you for being here, I think, okay, that's someone who knows how to lead people. And when your company is in crisis, when something happens where you need to rally the troops, having engendered that kind of loyalty, personal loyalty, I think there's no amount of payment for crisis communications that's going to replace a team that genuinely likes you and wants you to succeed.
Love that.
The challenge there, I think, as an on-air correspondent, you're interviewing a wide spectrum of leaders, many of whom are in that category of not being the kind of leader that you respect, perhaps the kind of leader you actively don't respect. But in your work, how do you bridge that reality when you're on air and you're responsible for communicating and drawing the best out of that person?
Well, I certainly never call them on it. That would be a bad way to
Probably
do
not
the interview. No, well,
but
and also,
nonetheless, you're feeling those emotions yourself.
But also, as I get older, I start to make allowances for neurodivergence. And I'll give you an example. Now I can't remember.
What do you mean by that, neurodivergence?
People who think differently, people who process information in a way that may not be the same way that I process information. And I recently, in the last year, I had a CEO of a big company that I cover who said that he often makes hiring decisions and promotion decisions based on his gut. That when you are in front of him, that there's this instant connection and this chemistry and he can feel it, and that's who he hires. And then I followed up with, that would seem to preclude, though, people who have Asperger's and may not be very good at connecting in conversation with other people, but they have real value in the job that you want or in the skills that you want. And always going off of your gut about who you're connecting with means that you're only hiring people that you like off the bat, which what we know from science. I mean, Jack, you could back this up, right? That's going to be self-selecting. You're going to like people who are like yourself. And then you get a bunch of groupthink in your organization because you haven't left any room open for, I don't genuinely like this person, or I'm not really feeling connected to this person, but I need to look a little bit deeper. Maybe this person doesn't present well face-to-face in an interview. There's nerves. let me think about the neurodivergent part of this, and is this person processing information in a different way?
So the example you just gave is a perfect segue to the category that is one of your specialized areas at CNBC, casinos and gaming. And that's a very data-driven, empirically driven industry where you have leaders who are very focused, and your role is to focus them on the financial realities of their business and their industry and category. But yet you just told a story. And so how do you connect in your interviewing and in your conversations the storytelling with the news and the financial reporting?
That is an excellent question, because as you know, I came from general news and from political news. I spent a decade at MSNBC covering politics and natural disasters. And so going into CNBC and reading balance sheets was, that was a challenge. It was not something that I had a lot of practice doing. Even when I had covered the great financial crisis in 2007, 2008, 2009, and foreclosures across the nation and plummeting employment. I think when you see the numbers and the numbers start telling a story, well, then it means that you've spent some time at CNBC and have started to let the economics paint that narrative. So when I sit with someone and I'm talking to them about the performance of their company, I might talk about numbers and I might talk about margin growth and the percentage thereof. But what I'm interested in is there was a beginning to that before the number. Where we are now, the middle of the story is the number. And then there's the trajectory of this story. Where's it going? And for the CNBC audience, they're always interested in where it's going.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to know where you've been.
Yep.
But really, it's where is this story going? How is it going to end? And so if I can build that narrative, and when I'm doing an interview, I do have in my mind, here's the beginning, here's the middle.
What's the end?
Where's it going?
Where's this going? Sometimes I get sidetracked. But it still is a story, even when it's the numbers. I still feel like this is an old-fashioned journalism lesson, news writing 101. Don't bog down your story in too many numbers. They start to lose their power. There's power in a big number, and the rest of it, can I describe the growth without being specific? And I try to revert to that. But, when you work with business people, especially CEOs, I think it's remarkable the way that they can come up with the numbers in an earnings call in answer to an analyst question off the top of their head. They're living and breathing those numbers because it is their story. And my job then is to make that accessible not only to the people who are also living and breathing numbers, but to my father-in-law who watches CNBC religiously. He's in his 90s. He's been watching CNBC his whole life. I want to make this relevant and interesting and compelling for him.
Right. You're going down the road I wanted to go down next, which is about the communication, the power of communication as a leader. And you're a professional communicator. So you know that it's a skill, right? You're not just 12 and a great communicator, right? It's a skill like golf or tennis. You can learn to be better at it. So give our listeners some baseline tips for business, how to be a better communicator. What are some of the first things to keep in mind as you're a communicator, as a leader?
I think when you're going into a conversation with anybody, if you have advance notice, to do a quick search on the person and find out a little bit about who they are, what they're interested in, what their experience is. The times when I have been most caught flat-footed is when I don't know something important about someone that I feel like I should have known.
So it's not about what you're going to do first. The first filter is who's the person I'm going to be talking to. Interesting.
That's right. And listen, on the plane, I meet the most fascinating people. partly because, and I'm not trying to be the annoying person who won't shut up next to you, but I'm genuinely curious about who you are and what you do. Now, that person doesn't expect me to come to the table knowing who they are and having done like a whole thorough background search on them. They would probably be freaked out by it. Right. But there are people, I met a guy who won the World Series of Poker, and he had no expectation that even though I cover gambling, that I would know who he was. But the minute he said that, I had so many questions about how he did that. How is he managing a job in finance with poker, and how do those worlds overlap? It was so informative, mostly because I'm curious, AKA I'm nosy, but because I'm a journalist, I get free rein to call it curiosity instead of nosiness.
Radical curiosity. You did that. I was watching CNBC the week before the Super Bowl, and there you were at the Super Bowl interviewing the athletes on their financial investment
because
strategy.
They don't expect it.
That was great. Tell us what you learned and what your experience was, and what your perspectives are about athletes coming out of that experience.
Well, one, there are some athletes who reach the Super Bowl and they are not well versed on finances and they don't seem particularly interested in it. And I think the NFL wants to do a better job making sure that all of the players have access to financial literacy. Some of those guys, though, are unbelievably in tune with where their money's at work and what they're doing and what the market is doing and who should be the next Fed chair. And so I've been doing that story at the Super Bowl for a few years now. And it's always surprising the level and the depth of knowledge some players have about finance. But one guy, he said that, on Fridays I like to go to the Pokemon store. I collect Pokemon and it's something that I do. And I said to him, well, is that an investment? He's like, it could be. Some of them are worth thousands of dollars, but for me, it's just a joy. And then I started asking him about Pokemon. Now, I'm the mom of twin boys. There's been a very long Pokemon period in our house, so I know something about it. But that was an example of an unexpected twist in the conversation, and I got something real and relevant, maybe not to Patriots super fans, but certainly makes him relevant to a much broader swath of the population because of his interest in these collectibles.
Okay, so coming back to the communicating. So one is know your audience. How about if your audience or a leader's audience is 12 people in a room, or their 400-person department, or their 10-person department? What are some other practical tips for people to be better communicators, to be more effective as leaders?
I think trying to keep it succinct and giving people a chance to ask more questions.
Talk less even.
I should take my own advice.
Well, so it's interesting that you say that, given I was asking you a question about being a more effective communicator, and one of your answers is one of your tips is actually listen more. That's really interesting.
Don't you think when you cover more ground in an interview, you come away feeling, wow, that was really interesting?
No, it's very true. But especially, I like what you said, be succinct. So you make the point you want to make, but then open up the room for others.
Right here this is a perfect example where what Tim and I are doing, our best questions come from when we're listening to the earlier answers and evolving the conversation out of it. In your couple of decades in news reporting and journalism, the news industry in the news business and the reality of reporting and journalism has gone through and is going to be accelerated in its what is the future? What is the next story? Where is it going? So when you look at the challenge as a news person of maintaining ethics and morality in news, let's just focus on the ethics of news reporting. How do you feel that you maintain personally that responsibility for remaining who you are as a human being and as a person?
I mean, the news business is changing, and the way we make money is changing.
Yep.
And so that necessarily forces a shift in perspective about what the rules are. It used to be very simple. The advertisers are going to put forward the money, and you're not going to have, as the journalist, anything to do with the advertisers. The advertising department and the editorial department are going to be completely separate. But I mean, I work on beats. It's really important for me to build relationships in the industries that I cover. And I led off this whole chat saying, I love people. Guess what? I really like a lot of the people that I cover.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the people I cover have interesting lives and backstories and personalities, and I like them. I'm rooting for them to succeed. But they know I'm a reporter. And so if they do something wrong, if their company's in trouble, I'm not going to stand back and go, oh, but I really like them as a person, so I'm not going to report on this problem for their company. What's necessary for me to maintain my own ethics and ethics of that of my employer is to ask tough questions, no matter who's sitting across from me, to be willing to grapple with the elephant in the room. Case in point, about a year and a half ago, Caesars and MGM were targeted in cyber intrusions. Caesars opted to pay the ransom and didn't have a massive shutdown. That went against the advice, by the way, of Homeland Security and other law enforcement. MGM listened to the advice of law enforcement, didn't pay the ransom, and had pretty severe business disruption. A week after that happened, I was hosting the keynote session at the biggest gaming conference in Las Vegas, and the CEO of MGM was across from me. Now, he hadn't spoken out about the cyber intrusion. Everyone in the audience wants to hear about the cyber intrusion.
Elephant in the room.
I'm not going to lead up with some softball question about where gambling is going. I just said to it, you know what's coming. Let's get to it. And to his credit, and this is something that, to your question about what makes an effective communicator, Bill Hornbuckle was very candid in talking about the decision-making that went into not paying the ransom and why he made that decision. And it was the first time we had heard from him about that, and it made news. But I think that authenticity, and he is in every interview, even if he's being cautious, he's candid to the point where he can be. Now, there are some things that CEOs will refuse to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But being as authentic and true to yourself as you can be in a public setting, I think goes back to making your team like you, make your audience like you, being, offering up vulnerability is powerful.
I like that. I know you have this is a great story, and I know you have a million great stories. Give us one or two from your mentors, stories that led to learnings that you have used throughout your professional communicating career. You can say who the mentor was or who the boss or mentor was, or you don't have to. That they can be remain nameless. But the story into the insight. I'll bet you've got a couple of good ones.
Oh my gosh, it's like I feel like I'm that girl in the pageant that was flummoxed by the question, and she's like, and the Iraqis and stuff.
On.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like you have just stumped me about the lessons that led to that.
We can come back to it.
I will say, we were just talking about vulnerability. One of the biggest mistakes I ever made in my life, one of the most humiliating mistakes I ever made, was calling Jesse Jackson by the wrong name on the air. it was written in the script, and I didn't know the script was there, and I didn't see it, and I read it without even knowing it came out of my mouth. And in the moment, I just cringed. And I called him right afterwards, and I apologized. And I said, it was wrong in my script. I didn't see it. I didn't catch it. I didn't know it had come out of my mouth, but I'm so, so sorry. And I just want to reassure you that I don't think all preachers look alike. I had called him Reverend Al Sharpton.
Oh, wow.
And he laughed. And everybody else in the room who was there for that apology sighed with relief.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know a lot about Jesse Jackson other than, he ran for president and he was this pivotal figure in the civil rights movement and his proximity to Reverend King when he was assassinated. And I had this opportunity because of the grace that he showed me to get to know him and to become friends with him. He demanded my presence at the Rainbow Push Coalition conference, wanted me on stage interviewing the civil rights leaders in Greensboro who had gone to sit at the drugstore counter. He introduced me to his wife and his kids. And then we built this real, true friendship. And the lesson that I took from that is when people wrong you, when you can forgive and you can turn that into something valuable and real. I can't, his passing is momentous.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that he forgave what was such a public error on my part it made me the butt of late night monologues. I hesitate even now to bring it up because it was such an embarrassing moment. And yet it turned into one of the greatest gifts of my life. When else would I have had that opportunity to get to know him as a person and know his backstory and know his own personal struggles? I mean, he talked to me about wanting so much to lead the nation and failing to land the nomination. That was devastating for him. When else would I have been able to hear from him on that?
But you were so authentic and vulnerable about the mistake, right? That's the takeaway that led to this relationship. You didn't try to cover it up, or you weren't going to pretend it didn't happen, but you were really full human there with the mistake, and what it led to is amazing, right?
And I also tried to, in the moment, lighten I wanted to cry. I wanted to weep with embarrassment, but instead I poked fun at myself and the situation.
These are life learnings.
Right, that's what we're
and if I may, you grew up the daughter of a preacher, moved around from community to community. I think Milwaukee, and you're in the South. You had, and when I hear effective speakers, especially in politics, I often learn that they are either pastors themselves but the quality of a sermon in terms of effective communication, I think, is something that we all aspire to in some ways, any of us who are public. So what are the takeaways and learnings from your dad and from that upbringing that contributed to your ability to not only navigate through that challenge, but also come out of it so strong?
It's so interesting because my dad is an incredible storyteller. What he does really well is he builds the momentum and then will use the bombast of his voice to land the message home. He reiterates points, I think, too much. But I'm like, yeah, Dad, we got it the first time. You don't have to reiterate it. But I've noticed that if you want the audience to take away one single point, making sure that it gets repeated is super important. Now, I could help my dad be a better public speaker because he is long-winded. I sat through so many sermons that were an hour and a half and approaching 2 hours. I mean, it's almost like he got a hold of our president and taught him how to give a State of the Union. But, you know, I had lots of experience with that with my dad. And so I think, you know, if I were to offer my dad one piece of advice, I think being more concise is better when you have a captive audience, and paying attention to the body language. You can tell when people are ready for you to shut up because they start squirming in their seats.
When you said that to him, what did he say to that? Like, they're not squirming, or I'm not paying attention to that? Because that's a great point. You can kind of read the room. What did he say to the read the room factor? I
mean, I'm the daughter of a Baptist preacher. Do you think I have ever tried to give my dad unsolicited advice?
As a professional in the communications industry, I do.
Oh, no, he doesn't see that. He just sees, you know, he named me Contessa. I'm the little princess. Yeah. Like, he's not interested at all in what I do for a living, and he's interested in, am I safe?
Right.
Am I a loving, obedient daughter?
Oh boy.
So having worked together, you and I, at the Newhouse School on the board of advisors, and seeing you with students, I was going to go to a generational question, but you led me to ask, in the generational context, what's the relationship between your dad and your sons?
Oh, you know, they like to climb up on him and ruffle his hair, and he's a grandpa. He's an amazing grandpa. Yeah, they have not yet had the opportunity to sit in a pew when he's in the pulpit. So,
so there's no sermonizing as a granddad yet.
Not yet, but you know, they're only 12, so there's room for that.
2 hours of a 12-year-old twin sitting for an hour after 2 hours. Yes. I got the under on that, but you know.
But coming back to this reality of the work you've done and the connection you have with students through the Newhouse School, and what your advice is to fledgling journalists. Journalism continues to be a sought-after major at schools, and very much of the education continues to be very traditional. Where do you see that headed?
I know, but here's what I don't get. My niece came to me. Auntie, I think I want to do what you do. And I said, oh, really? I said, let me just ask you something. Have you ever watched the news? She goes, no. I'm like, well, when you say you want to do what I do, what do you mean by that? She goes, you know, you get to travel a lot and you meet interesting people.
Nice blazers, you know. Yeah.
I do think that there's a sense from a lot of kids that that's journalism. And it is, look, what I do is journalism, but it's also highly competitive and very few of us end up here. I also think what influencers do is journalism. I think what people do in their communities have you ever been on this app called Nextdoor?
Yes.
It's a bunch of neighbors going on, and sometimes it's gossip, sometimes it's about lost pets, but there's an element of journalism that happens on Nextdoor that is hyper local and super important. You want to know whether your local Speedway got robbed? You're going to find it on Nextdoor. You're not going to find that necessarily in, you know, the news that's coming to you from a city that's an hour away, but you will find it on that. I think that kind of journalism, citizen journalists, are super important and have real value. I don't know that it should be a major in any college. I think it would be so much better if people were trained in a specific area: public policy, marketing, finance, international relations. Get real expertise in an area and then let curiosity drive you to the journalism. You can take journalism classes to learn how to write for TV or how to write for, I mean, right now, in all honesty, the kids know better than we do about how to write for TikTok.
Right.
And if that's where most people are getting their news, and it is, maybe they should be teaching us. Maybe the experienced journalists should be doing more listening.
Tim,
I think that's the mic.
I know that's a mic drop.
Yeah, I feel like
we're
it was one.
We're at our normal time, but there's one more question that I'd really
I'm
like
gonna
to
allow
ask you. Thank you. You spoke earlier about when you're doing an interview and the financial story comes out, but you want to understand the beginning. You know you're at the point you're at now, but you want to understand where the future is. So in that context, you've had a history and a background. You understand the origins of news. You've studied it. And you know where you are and where CNBC and the news business is today. Where do you see the news business heading?
Well, I hope it's heading to a future that still includes me until I get to retirement.
I hope it does too.
Yeah, please.
And I hope that is not too soon.
No, because my boys are only 12. I've got a ways to go. I think it's an excellent question. I think it's like energy. It cannot be created nor destroyed, but it does change form. And what I was saying about the value of social media in a journalistic pursuit, it's not just people who have journalism degrees who worked at newspapers and now have transferred to television or streaming that are the journalists. Anyone who's curious and is committed to telling the truth is a journalist. And the nation cannot survive without them.
I want to bring you back. Thank you for that. I want to bring you back to the business aspects, advertising, subscription models. In the model you're describing, which is an influencer, very personal, Nextdoor, the business of revenue generation in news, there's a lot of question about. Advertisers don't want to necessarily be associated with some types of news. Others want the association. From a business point of view, you're in the business of covering the business. The industry doesn't look at itself very much and its own story, which is undergoing radical change. If you were to want to ask one question to the leaders who are directing the large business of news media companies, what would be that question?
How are we going to make money? We're not doing this out of the goodness of our hearts. It's not a nonprofit. There is nonprofit journalism, but I have bills to pay. I've got kids in private school.
And we've got to be honest.
And we have to be honest. So how are we going to pay for it? If the advertisers are finding more value for their dollars in the hyper segmented, very niche advertising on influencers who are reaching a specific audience, then we need to do something differently. And we are. You can see this shift happening where live events are becoming more important. The Wall Street Journal is doing it. The New York Times is doing it. CNBC does it. We have viewers who are willing to pay for access to the people that they know and follow and respect on television for a live event. I think the pandemic taught us that as great as technology is, we still yearn for this human connection. And facilitating that for people who are willing to pay for that access, I think is good journalism. It's another way around it. I think offering that opportunity up in firewalls, we have the paywalls. I said firewalls, I meant paywall. Mm-hmm. But if you say to someone, if our journalism is valuable, then you should be willing to pay for it. And what that means is maybe your audience is shrinking, but the people who are willing to pay for it are so engaged that they are more valuable than to the advertisers who decide to commit to your platform. I think that's all, one way to think about it. But also, the American people, that's mostly my audience, but around the world, we have to decide, do we want truth tellers or do we want what we already believe is true about the world regurgitated back to us? are we interested in being well informed about the world in which we live, or do we want to be gently delivered into this sort of narcolepsy where we don't know what's happening in our world? And social media has delivered algorithms
Right.
that are coaxing people into a sense that they are informed, but they're not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm appalled by that. I find that very concerning. I don't have all the answers about how to fix it. I just know that these are incredible tools and they're becoming even more important, but they also, back to the beginning of the story, they make us covetous and jealous and envious, and it leads to discontent. And that discontent leads to divisiveness with our neighbors and our families and with our nation. And so some guardrails, even internal discipline, is important.
These are things that are going to have to evolve.
Speaks to the human quality of communication and the importance of recognizing the human connection, which you kept coming back to, that human connection.
In a tech-enabled world.
Should I put that on my, headstone? Hashtag, she loves people.
Why not?
And dogs.
And dogs.
You didn't mention your love of dogs.
Nice.
I love people and animals.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm like Pollyanna.
It's important for an audience to know that about you, by the way. We have a lot of pet lovers and dog lovers out there, and I know that about you.
Well, I'll tell you another thing. If you want to be a good leader, talk about your animals and what they do.
Really?
I literally think some of the best responses that I've ever had in public speaking have come because I talked about how Nami can now do buttons and talk back to me, and then it doesn't matter what I've achieved in my career or what presidents I've met. What matters is, well, how did you teach your dog to talk?
So the relatability of your pet as a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
You're better at thank you, Contessa. This has been great. You're better at the recaps than I am. So why don't you start?
There's been so much. You started and you finished with listening as being the most important, perhaps, quality of leadership and what separates leadership. The most important thing in being a good communicator is listening. You talked
being
about
concise.
Be concise.
And then have the ability to listen. Yeah.
It's important. You asked how, and in conversation, you ask how you can be supportive and how you can kind of flip the conversation to what you can do and how you can be supportive. You're curious. That came up quite a bit. Know the audience, listen to the audience. I think that comes back to your dad and the point of being concise. How do you read the room and respond to the room? Your love of children, your two sons, your new dog. You have a new dog, and your love of Joe. And
that's my husband.
Your husband, and we'll go back and say you love him 110% of the time. There are just some times when he may not be that lovable.
I'm never going to play this podcast for him.
And I've got one more, which is the ability to be vulnerable. Sometimes is a really powerful thing. I think. Is
there anything we missed?
Yeah. Did we miss anything?
I mean, I think you captured it very well. If you ever need to get up and say a eulogy about me, you'll know everything there is to know.
Oh, we did our job.
Your gravestone, your eulogy.
Yeah, exactly.
Contessa.
That's no.
You're for those of you who are listening and may not be watching, I just want to add how young you are, Contessa. So for your experience, for the role you've had in the industry, you continue to not only look young, feel young, act young. You are young.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you very much.
Thanks again. And let's now thank our listeners for listening today and say that thank you. And if you learned anything about leadership and communication, I'll bet you did, from this conversation with Contessa, please go share it and join us now with Contessa on this movement to lead as a human, because we know that even though data and dashboards, AI are important, a real competitive advantage in business is still about unleashing the human potential. And this has been Lead Human.